operations. And so the restriction on information under Operation Sovereign Borders was only not to telegraph to people smugglers what their operational activities were on the water. So that is on water, but Operation Sovereign Borders, as I understand it, didn't relate to the operations of the detention networks and the relationship of the Department of Immigration. I'm sorry, if you'd like to give evidence, Senator Hanson-Young, please feel free to ask the Chair, but my question is to Professor Triggs, so I'd please ask you to allow...
That may well be the case, and I can certainly take it on notice.
Actually, sorry, Mr O'Brien, my questions are actually for Professor Triggs, because I'm trying to work out, as the President, what was in her, because I'm going to come to a series of questions in relation to her thoughts and understandings and interactions with her counterparts in government. So if you wouldn't mind, if it's possible, I would like to give Professor Triggs the opportunity to respond directly.
I wonder if you could be clear, what is the question?
Okay. The question is, what led you to... Sovereign Borders was on water. What made you think that the Department of Immigration was going to withhold information so much that you needed to initiate an adversarial inquiry with the power to compel evidence? Because it seems to be a big jump from that relationship.
I think that's the question. I think that's clear.
So can I just correct one aspect?
No, I'm sorry. If you wouldn't mind, I really would like to hear from Professor Triggs.
It's not an adversarial.
Yes, I think firstly we are concerned at your use of the word adversarial. That's not the position at all. It's totally misunderstanding our role. We're not there in an adversarial role. We're there in a non-partisan role to inquire into the impact on the children, and that was really our objective. But I do need to correct that, because it's a most misleading and unfortunate term that I'd very much like to see expunged from the record. We are not advocates, or we never take an adversarial position. We simply try to ascertain the facts from the evidence that is given to us, and we've reported in an even-handed way accordingly, and I hope that you too have had a chance to read our report.
Oh, you can see it's highlighted and marked, Professor Triggs.
I'm delighted, Senator Reynolds. That's wonderful. You might be the only one who has.
The question was, why did you think it was necessary to use your powers to get documents from the government when Sovereign Borders didn't preclude that? I think that's it in a nutshell.
It is. And look, Professor Triggs, thank you. No, just Chair. I'll just look, Professor Triggs.
I'd very much like to answer your question.
Sorry, I thought you'd finished in the point of clarification. So just on that, before we get back to the substantive issue, I take your point and thank you for that clarification. But my misunderstanding came, I think, from Ms O'Brien's her description of going from a cooperative and collaborative working arrangement where information was free-flowing to the point you described as a technical point where you had to jump to an inquiry so that you could compel evidence from the department. And to me that seems...
It's not a big leap, Senator.
Can I provide some information which might help answer your question?
Please.
Everything my colleague has said is correct, but you might also be interested to know, and we'll certainly get the letter up to you, but on the 17th of September 2013, I wrote to Mr Martin Bowles, and that's it's quite an interesting letter because it very clearly demonstrates that as early as the 17th of September, before the final decision was made...
2013?
The 17th of September 2013, we had written, or I had written to the Minister, the Secretary of the...
Sorry, can we just make sure we're all on... I'm just going through this list of your correspondence in relation to this. What page is that letter on? The 17th of September.
No, we haven't tabled that letter. The matter didn't come up, and we're very happy to give it to you.
Because it's about the snapshot report.
It's about the snapshot report, not about the children's inquiry. So, but if you'd let me finish my answer, you'll understand.
So that letter's not in your timeline?
No, because it was not in relation to the inquiry. Okay,
yes.
So good. So I'm trying to answer your question, if I understand it correctly. Why did we think that one of the many reasons for holding an inquiry might appropriately be that we had a drying up of information? Why do we think that? Now, one of the reasons, one of the many answers that one can give to this, is that by September, when we were trying to complete the State of the Nation snapshot report that I've described to you and held up for you, we were very conscious that information was not being forthcoming even as early as that date. And so I wrote to Mr Bowles and said that we would be very grateful if he could provide us with information for the purposes of the snapshot report. And I specifically say how much I appreciated his work in achieving humane outcomes for asylum seekers and looked forward to working with him. But basically the thrust of that letter, and I'll certainly hand it up to you, was to signal the fact that we were already concerned in September that the usual level of information was starting to dry up, and we were very worried that we would not be able to complete the State of the Nation snapshot report.
No, look, I understand that, and thank you for that additional clarification. And yes, if you could table that. So that was just out of caretaker period, correct? So you sent that letter to the Secretary Bowles just after caretaker period. And what was his response?
I don't recall. I'd have to go back again.
Could you take that on notice as well? Because I think
yep.
his response to that would be quite instructive, because clearly you weren't happy with whatever response you got from him to have then taken that next step.
Yes, well, we had continuing concerns that mounted, that it was proving very difficult to get the usual level of cooperation and information that we'd received. And I say that with great caution, because we have always had, and I believe now, have a workable day-to-day relations between the officials of the Commission and the Department. But at that time, things were a little difficult. They were cautious in giving us information.
So you wrote to him about this particular issue, about information drying up. Was that before or after Operation Sovereign Borders had been announced?
I'd have to look at the day. I have no idea when Operation Sovereign Borders was announced, but I assume it was around that time, but I don't specifically recall.
So, so just so I understand, is that you wrote to Martin Bowles on the 17th of September to say you had concerns about not getting the information you needed during the caretaker period of government.
No, it was not necessary during that caretaker period. It might have been, it was earlier than that.
So information had actually dried up.
Post-election. You
said previously in your statement here that the information had dried up as a result of Operation Sovereign Borders. But now, as I understand that it wasn't Sovereign Borders, you're saying that information had started to dry up before the caretaker period, or during the caretaker period under the previous government?
Well, it was presumably during the caretaker period, but it was actually after that as well. Okay. So we were seeing, as I've tried to explain, this is an evolving and constantly moving environment. Yep. And we were becoming concerned at not the drying up, or the dried up, but that we were getting less information, less cooperation.
You saw over a period of time, going back even before the caretaker period, that there'd been a general drying up.
Well, I have to check my records because, again, I don't... with regard to precise dates, I would like to check my records, and I'd have to speak to the staff of the Commission. At what time did they feel that the weekly meetings weren't working, that usually we could our staff could pick up the phone to their equivalent and get a very friendly and cooperative response with whatever information they could properly give to us, they did. Now, I need to get some dates if that would help you, as to when we started to get the feeling that that level of cooperation and information was not at the same level.
Okay, but clearly if you'd written to him 11 days after... Last one. 11 days after the caretaker period, you already had considerable issues. Now, I presume you would have rung him. If you hadn't got an answer or you got his response, you would have got on the phone to your colleague and just said, look, Martin, we've got an issue here. We're not getting the information we need anymore. What can we do to fix it? So what was his response when you... did you contact him?
We had, again, good relations. I would have to take that on notice as to exactly what he said.
Okay. No, thank you very much.
Thank you.